Hi, this is Paul, and we are. Oh shoot! No, I'm. Ezra is being kind enough to be a guinea pig. I am not recording this in Zoom. I'm recording this on Riverside. Um, Paul Renee was using Riverside for playing around, and other people have. And because I'm playing around with the files more afterwards, I thought, well, let's play with this. And Ezra contacted me, and so that's the price. That's the price, Ezra. You get to be the guinea pig.
Okay, I'm willing to take it.
I'm a lover of guinea pigs. We had a lot of guinea pigs when my kids were small, and I thought having guinea pigs was great because we had guinea pig funerals, we had baby guinea pigs, we had
That's what
everything.
this might turn out to be.
The guinea pig funeral. So Ezra, you are I actually met your wife first because she was in
Yes.
one of my breakout groups at Midwestary.
Yep.
And then you guys were also at Southeastuary.
Oh, yeah.
And you have now become sort of Grim Grizz's wingman.
Yeah. Yes.
We'll have to get into that at some point because I'm really happy to see that development because I think it's a
Yeah,
good thing.
a pitch for your, thumbnail, you could say, conference to co-host or, castaway to co-pilot, something like that.
Oh, I like that. Castaway to Copilot. Except hopefully it won't get into that miserable Microsoft AI thing. Castaway to Copilot. All right. Now again, this Riverside thing is going to drive me a little crazy because you have to, at the end of this, you have to stay on long enough to finish the upload. You're probably used to that now with StreamYard.
Yeah, that's okay.
So it's supposed to, Riverside was first pitched as something that's supposed to be better than Zoom in terms of yielding a recording because it's ensuring that we have two separate streams. And anyway, so all right, let's throw that to the side. Ezra, tell me about the home you grew up in.
Well, I knew I was gonna get that question, so my first thought was, I grew up in, a split level house, split level family. Parents had a split level marriage and, had a split level dad. So, this is a small town, central Illinois. I'm actually representing. This is, Danny Lloyd from The Shining.
Oh,
Central Illinois boy like myself. My mom actually taught him in school.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, my mom was a teacher. She was teaching home ec when I was growing up, and then, she got her master's at some point, and she switched over to English. My dad had also started out as a teacher, but, he had a series of jobs, and then when I was, little, he worked from home, had his own business. I think he was doing, like, graphic design, marketing type stuff and consulting stuff, and,
You got to make
yeah.
good on the split level.
Oh, yeah, we will.
Okay.
And, the town, was we lived in a little subdivision about, 5 miles from the town. The town was 2,000 people, small farm town. There were, s 4 churches, 2 gas stations. That's about it. Um, we went to, what was called the AC2 church. This is Apostolic Christian, uh, Church Nazarene. I had to look this up because I did not really pay attention when I was a kid. And, we were the AC2s, and then there were the AC1s, and they were, the more traditional, uh, perhaps more fundamentalist, branch of the church that at some point the ours had branched off from. And so that had a big effect on the town, that church being there. And the school board being a lot of members of that church. And So, all the neighboring towns were kind of, like one of the neighboring towns was sort of a lot of people on meth and stuff, and our town was this, nice school district, and, um, the AC ones, yeah, these were both churches where you get baptized, when you join the church, and so, they kinda had this thing of, like, "You're gonna join the church, time to, like, get your yayas out while you can," kinda thing, and then they join the church, and it could kinda be like a real transformation, and they would become very serious, and I think the AC ones didn't really play sports or anything like that, and they tended to not own televisions or have them in a closet somewhere and not watch them, uh, stuff like that. So that really, affected the town,
They were steep
and
slope Nazarenes. I have known some.
yep. So, yeah, that just really affected the, culture of the place, so we grew up, going to the Berean bookstore and watching Veggie Tales and listening to Christian rock and stuff like that. Although my parents were a little more into set and, being kinda cosmopolitan and in their own way or something. So, yeah, um, growing up, I was, never really alone, but I was lonely, and I remember when I was, like, 5 or something, I had, nodules on my vocal cords because I was, like, screaming for attention all the time. I'm the youngest of 3, 2 older
Uh,
brothers. They're, 5 and 7 years older, and, and they would actually give me a lot of attention and especially my middle brother kind of, like, took care of me a lot of the time and, like, was, playing with me and stuff.
both your
Uh
parents were working.
yes. And but yeah, I was like it was like, I'm sure I got the most attention being the youngest, but it seemed like everybody was preoccupied with something that I didn't understand. And, at church, there was, like, a weird vibe or something. My dad was really involved with the church and stuff and would do, like, youth group things, and I think he ran a VBS one time, and he, like, wrote a whole musical for the VBS, and they put it on and stuff. He's very creative, he had studied Plato, and, his favorite book was Moby Dick, and he would talk about philosophy all the time, you know. But, church for me was getting through the, Sunday school or the, service and then, playing Star Trek with my 2 friends at church.
What do you mean playing Star Trek? Just like in the
Yeah,
back
like, we would
of the
take a
church?
empty room, we'd take one of the empty, like, Bible school rooms, and then we would, you know, pretend it was the Enterprise, and I had 2 friends there, and I was always Kirk, and then my one friend was Spock, and he would kinda play Spock, and then our 3rd friend, we were like, "You're McCoy,"
Oh, you were original Star Trek. You weren't even Next Generation.
Yes, at that time, we were all OG, yes, yeah, because my dad had really raised us on Star Trek. He's a big sci-fi fan. He's written some sci-fi and stuff himself, and so, yeah, that's what church was to me, and then, when I was in, like, the 4th grade, I got mono, and I had this, like, complicated mono where you just have it for months, and you're exhausted all the time, and so I don't think I didn't even go back to school, like, eventually, I just, stayed out of school the rest of the year. And, since my mom was working, I spent the weeks living with my grandma. She lived in, like, a neighboring really small town. I still love that town. I went back there recently. It's like I have all these, it had just, 1 gas station and, like, 5 streets, but it was, like, magical to me. But, so I think I was out of church that whole time too, and then my brother stopped going to our church, my oldest brother, and then I was like, I didn't realize that was an option, that we could not go. So then I was like, "Can I just not go, please?" And I remember even then, like, I tried to explain to I had all these, like, theological issues early,
Hmm.
like, I remember, when I was, like, 5 or something, a girl got up and was talking about how, if we don't, convert, like, tribesmen of an uncontacted tribe in Africa, then, like, he'll burn in hell for all eternity and stuff. And, this was, like, a kid saying this, and I was kinda like, "Oh, that sounds kind of extreme, whatever, but, I'm sure that they'll put some nuance on it after she's done talking." And I remember that they were like, "No, that's it. That's correct." And I was like, "Oh, this doesn't fit with my, like, TV world, understanding of reality." And, then later I would told my I told my parents, like, "I don't understand church because we talk about Jesus and all these things that he did, and it seems like we don't do any of those things. We just talk about it." And then later I said it was kinda like going to the church of Jimi Hendrix, and they would hang it's like they'd hang guitars on the wall, and then you'd, like, reach for the guitar, and they'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 we don't play the guitar. This is the church of Jimi Hendrix. We don't play the guitar." So, we stopped going. Everybody stopped going.
The whole family,
Yeah.
including your father who ran the VBS and wrote the play.
Yep. Mhm.
You deconverted your whole family?
I guess, I don't know. It was like, well, my brother stopped going first, my oldest brother, and he had all these problems with, the church, and he was also becoming much more liberal. We were sort of raised by movies. My family was obsessed with movies. We went to, we were more sacred about going to the movies than going to the church, I would say. And my brother worked at the video store, and then he was just, like, watching every movie, and then we started to, be exposed to all these, like, more progressive ideas and things, and my parents were shifting left with the Clintons and stuff, and so he started to have real problems with the church and the church's reaction to, like, gay people and things like that.
Had your parents been raised Nazarene?
No, my dad was raised Lutheran. I'm not sure, actually, about my mom. But, they both I don't think her parents, attended church regularly,
Okay.
and then, they both, I think, converted or yeah, in high school. And my dad said, he would, like, convert everybody in the class multiple times over and stuff, he was really into it. And,
How did they wind up in that town?
um,
Jobs?
yeah, I actually don't know that exactly. I know that, uh, my mom was from there. Her dad owned a tavern, and I think her mom worked there, but, I never knew either of my grandfathers. They were both dead.
Oh. Nazarenes are teetotalers. That's interesting, the tavern angle.
Well, yeah, she joined like, they weren't in the church ever, her
Okay.
parents. She
Right, right,
joined.
right, right.
And yeah, I think and then my dad, his family just moved to the town. He had, like, He's from a family of 9, so and they were, his dad's Italian, but there weren't, like we weren't ever part of any kinda, like, Italian community or anything. I don't recall ever knowing another Italian family. And like I said, they were Lutheran, not Catholic or whatever, so
But the movies functionally became your house of worship.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And yeah, and then, we stopped going, and then I was, like, maybe 12 or something, or 11, and my oldest brother graduated, and then by the time I was in high school, then, 9/11 happened. So it's only been a couple years since we stopped going, and then, my dad left my mom.
Do you know why?
Well, so some of this I won't say because I just don't feel like it's my story,
Obviously.
but, again, the split level house,
Yeah.
my brothers started living in the deep basement. In a split level, you got the basement and then you got the deep basement, right? So my brothers started living in the deep basement, but then they were going off to college. So then I moved into the deep basement, and my dad came down into the deep basement and told me, that well, basically, there had been drama between him and my mom,
Yeah.
uh, before, long before,
Yeah. Were you aware of
and
it as a kid?
no,
Okay.
probably all the adults in the church knew, and my brothers knew,
Mm,
and I never knew. And so I realized in a brief few moments, I realized a lot of things. I realized a kind of vibe with the church and why it was so easy maybe to stop going. And I realized, like, my parents did not get along for years and would fight, but always kept it away from us as much as possible. It was like they would be in their room arguing, and you could kind of hear type of thing, but
yeah.
I don't recall them ever fighting in front of us.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, like, I mean, I had a very like a weak sense of self.
Mm.
Like I had my identity was very blurry my whole life. And I was just obsessed with art and movies and stuff, and kind of in my imagination. And I remember even opining at one point, like, oh, I'll never be like an artist or anything though, because they have these like traumatic, difficult lives. And we like go to this nice little conservative church and we live in this like nice little town, like it's not gonna. Anyway,
Careful
so
what
yeah,
you wish for.
I found that out, and then my dad left. And then he had like a nervous breakdown, and he never fully recovered, I would say. So eventually he was diagnosed like bipolar, and he tended to have these kind of 5-year arcs in his life where he would uh usually have some kind of successful business venture and kind of ride a certain kind of wave and be extremely active, and hypomanic or maybe border into mania. And then those things would, kind of go down at a certain point. So at that time, I think he had just been involved with a .com type company from early on and kind of rode the whole wave. And then eventually the company went under and he was starting the next uh, period. And so then that was, uh, yeah, that happened. And then, and my dad was still around a lot. And I think he came back on weekends and they they were always very friendly and um, still got along for the most part. There would be occasional drama, and then it would start to bleed into being around us to a degree. And also, I was alone now pretty much because my brothers had both uh, moved away. I mean, they'd been in college and then, um, yeah, they weren't there.
Were all of you living in the house when they split, or were your brothers already starting to leave?
Well, they were already in, yeah, they'd already been in college. My oldest brother had moved out. My middle brother was living maybe at college
Mhm.
and was home in the summers. But
Okay.
eventually he had an apartment year round,
All right. So
at
it's
his
just you and
college.
mom
Yeah, and,
still in the split level house,
yep.
and you're way down in the basement.
Yeah, I basically had 2 floors to myself from then on.
What was that like?
Well, I really wasn't very close to my mom before that. She had seemed kind of, I just had felt distant from her.
Yeah.
So then we really got close.
Yeah.
And, at that time, she worked at the high school in the town. So she was one of my teachers, and again, 2,000 people in this town, so, like, our graduating class is 70 people,
Yeah.
you know? So, went to school, she drove me to school every day, and she
Sure.
worked there, and then we'd go
Yeah.
home
Go
together.
home together. Were a lot of the kids that you went to school with also from split level families?
Very small minority,
Hmm.
and basically, my friends ended up being, I mean, with 70 people, you're kind of friends with everybody, but the
Yeah.
people I was closest to tended to be from uh, the most liberal families and possibly the most dysfunctional of the families. But being, I don't recall anyone else in our class having parents that were separated, actually.
Hmm.
I don't, I'm sure that there might have been some that I didn't know about, but I do not recall that.
Now it's a trope, but did your grades tank? Did you suddenly become a cause of concern, or did you just sort of steadily keep quietly moving through the system?
Well, I more stayed steadily, but I had always had problems with authority
Okay.
and uh saw school as, I guess, mostly like a social activity, but I did not, I was like cynical. I later I thought of it as, my parents were both educators, really.
Yeah.
And my dad later taught college as well, and so did my mom. But they had like instilled in me the value of education. So naturally, I had no respect for the school system. My middle brother was like the academic of the three, and he was like uh, acing uh, the evaluations and all the things. He ended up going to law school, but I was sort of uh, cynical, but it was such a supportive community that, you know, I sorta, you know, stayed okay. And, I
So, what did you and your mom do after they split? Did you and your mom go to the movies? Did you and your mom watch a lot of TV?
well, we would still do things like that, sometimes with my dad. We would still, get together with my brother. My oldest brother still lived in the area, and eventually he was, I think at that time he worked for my dad too.
Okay. Did you spend weekends living with your dad, or did you always stay with your mom and then just do day trips with dad?
Dad for I think that I'm not sure how long this went on, but for a while, my dad would come home on the weekend,
Oh, okay.
and she would either stay there, or I think sometimes she would, stay somewhere stay at his
Okay.
place, other place.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But,
So they couldn't live together, but they could cooperate at
yeah,
least with you guys. And your father didn't immediately remarry or anything like that.
no. No, but there was some drama along, those
Yeah.
lines
Yeah.
eventually.
There usually are. Usually is.
But, it got very hard for me because like I said, my dad was sort of deconstructing, and he was struggling, with guilt and a lot of difficult things, but I felt that it really put a barrier between us. So it
Mm,
was like I didn't feel seen by him at that time.
mhm.
And then he started to really, struggle mentally, and there's, like, alcohol involved and so
Yeah.
and so I think for a time I was like, didn't want him around.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's a lot for a kid to handle, looking back on it, I'm sure you see that. I mean, I'm sure you look back now with adult eyes and I don't know, is that fair?
I mean, it started to feel then like I was the adult more.
Mm, yeah.
So that's kinda how it was for a while.
Yeah. All right, so you graduate high school. What do you do then?
Well
Or am I jumping ahead of something important?
well, they get divorced,
Okay.
and then my senior year, they remarry.
They remarry each other.
Yes.
Okay. That is not as unusual as a lot of people think.
Yeah, but that does mean that you end up attending your own parents' wedding.
That
And
I've never thought of, but it makes sense.
Yep. And this was at the church we used to go to had gone independent, and they'd opened this brand new, very large, church, and that's where it was.
Was it sort of a mega church style? Because at that point in time, everything's, you know,
A
the
little.
the established churches are feeling archaic, and so it's not unusual that you have a church spinoff, and they're gonna have the big sound and the band and the screens, and they're just gonna do the secret thing.
Yeah. It was very big and very, you know, beautiful in a sense, but yeah, I missed our sort of modest, old,
Yeah.
you know, wood church.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So, uh, now my wife is from the same town. I don't really feel like I met her until I was a sophomore because we had a class together. Now, this was after 9/11 and after my dad left. And then we had a class together, and, Um, there's actually so this is when like I really got to know her. But there's footage of us at like 5 playing musical chairs at like
Wow.
Halloween, and we're all dressed in costumes. And she's like, here's a chair. You can sit here, and I like sit and like snub her because
She's
she's
a
a,
girl.
yeah. Although I was very much like so obsessed with girls that I couldn't deal with them,
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah,
So, yeah, so as soon as I got to know her, I was like, this is the one. I mean, this is the one, obviously.
yeah.
But I think it took a few years through that, what I was going through, so that by senior year, it was like my F it all energy
Yeah.
had built enough such that we could start dating.
Okay. You got over the fear.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I remember we got together with this other girl and we watched Kill Bill Volume 1 together. And then just me and my wife watched Kill Bill Volume 2, and then we dated from then on.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. So then we were like inseparable, and
Yeah, yeah.
uh and
Well, if
yeah.
the house if home is awkward, having a romantic relationship is really convenient
Oh yeah.
because you don't have to it's a great way to escape the house.
Well, and some of the social things that start to happen in high school, uh I had a lot of difficulties with being around. So we kind of isolated a little bit. But I also was kind of I spent those last couple years of high school sort of workaholic a bit because I was the video intern,
Oh,
and so I made these videos that they would like show at homecoming, and then they show
yeah.
like the big one at prom.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was working on these like 24/7, and the
So
kid was ahead of
you were
me.
that was the niche you were in high school. You were one of the tech nerds.
I mean, yeah, the creative side of the
Yeah,
tech
yeah,
nerds,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, and like, I interned under the an older kid, and then he went to film school in Chicago, and so then I went to visit the film school, and then I was gonna go there, and, I moved in, and it was in the South Loop of Chicago, and my, it was the nicest dorm I've ever seen, too. Huge, and, my roommate hadn't moved in yet, but I had half the room and all my stuff in there. And I met a few of the kids that were going to this place. And I was watching this TV show. Again, TV shows were very big in my family. And I had the DVD set of this show, 6 Feet Under. Okay.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I remember that show. It was an early Showtime hit.
And yeah, I think my mom really liked the show too because one of her friends growing up, her father was like the mortician.
Oh,
uh, So she connected with the show.
yeah,
We also love The Sopranos,
yeah.
but which they called home movies. Okay. So I got the ending of 6 Feet Under, which is quite heavy.
I never made it that far. I think I was gonna watch it. My wife was like, "I don't wanna do this show," so I didn't watch it, and if my wife doesn't wanna watch something, I just don't have time to see it, so
The ending is very heavy. The whole show is about death.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Somebody dies at the beginning of every episode.
yeah. I like the show partly
Yeah.
as a pastor. Pastors and funeral directors, we do some similar things. So
So, the ending of that show is kinda overwhelming,
hmm.
and I watched that alone in this, whatever, like, 20th floor in Chicago, and I just kinda freaked out, and I was like, I don't wanna go here. This is insane. This is actually insane.
You don't want to go to the school?
Yeah, like,
Oh,
I'm gonna go to this, like, film school with these, like, rich kids and stuff who are, like, already, like, smoking weed in the bathroom and stuff, and, downtown Chicago, no. And I didn't really know anyone, and I had real social issues, I would say, by that time, and I was just like, "This is nuts. I wanna be, near my wife," and, she was,
you weren't married yet, though. She was still your
no.
girlfriend.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
girlfriend. And so she was, at a state school that was near where we grew up, and so and all my friends were at most of my friends were at a community college
Yeah. Yeah.
and living back home.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Call my parents. I wanna go
Wow.
here."
Wow. You get accepted, you get moved in, you do all that rigmarole, and even before your roommate comes, you pull the plug.
Yep, you know? I met a few nice people at like, you went to kinda like mop classes, like, these are the people you're gonna meet,
Yeah,
and I met
yeah,
some people that seemed really cool, but
yeah.
I was like, "This is actually, nuts." And, yeah, and I watched that show that was, like, about what do you wanna do with your life if you're gonna die? And I was like, "I don't wanna be here." So I, went back and then I had to, take shorter classes, like to, mid-semester or whatever to get going, and then I, went to, um, community college, and I lived at home, and I got my associates, and then when it was time to, maybe go back to go to get a bachelor's, I went and visited the state school, and I talked to the English department, and I talked to the philosophy department, and the philosophy department was less credit hours, so much less, and I'd already taken some philosophy classes, and, that was kinda my first, apart from, I mean, my dad talked about Plato a lot, and, he also had studied, like, Richard Rorty in his,
Oh, yeah.
at some point, so we're, like, talking about philosophy, so I got really into philosophy and got started getting, my philosophy degree, and then, I was at the state school, had an apartment. My dad lost, his company. He had, like, his own company. They lost their only contract.
Mm,
So then it was like, and they were helping support me.
mhm,
So then I moved back home because it really wasn't that far of a commute.
mhm.
So I was commuting from home. But, my folks were kinda going through, like, their 2nd, deconstruction. Now, there was this Christian songwriter named David Bazan.
Okay.
He played in a band called Pedro the Lion,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
and they were kind of a DIY Christian
yeah,
band, and I really liked that,
yeah.
and I'd started to get into, well, I didn't mention this, but I mean, right before, uh right before my dad left, he taught me, like, my first song on the guitar, and then I was
Okay.
just, like, playing the guitar all the time, writing songs all the time. That was my So I love this songwriter, and he was the edgy Christian songwriter.
Yeah, yeah,
He's, like, the
yeah,
only Christian songwriter I still listen to.
yeah,
It's this guy.
yeah. Yep. I remember hearing his name. I never got into any of his music, but I remember his name would be thrown around as sort of this edgy Christian songwriter.
Oh yeah. So he totally deconstructed,
Oh.
and then he was doing a tour of house shows, and I was studying philosophy. So the way philosophy departments kind of work is if you have any beliefs when you enter, they do their best to remove those. Okay.
Yes,
So,
they do. I completely believe it.
yeah. Yeah. And like I was, I was trying to study like existentialism. I was getting into existentialism and I was like reading the beats and stuff. And, I had like there was only like one professor I could talk to about that. And I did like an independent study thing. But then we go see, one of my favorite songwriters, this little house show. It's like youth group. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he plays all these new songs. Every song is like a victim shit takedown of some aspect of the faith. Okay. So we are like on kind of cloud nine in a way, participating in this event, And that was like March. And I think I turned like 22, graduated. My dad went into like a treatment facility. My mom sold the house while I was in there, I think to cover debts, etc.
Sure.
And they tore out the entire basement, the sub basement, the deep basement. They had to tear all that out, make sure there was no leaks in the foundation, whatever,
Yeah,
to sell the house.
yeah.
So I was sleeping on a tarp in the remnants of what was my part of the house.
Oh my gosh.
And I was watching the end of The Sopranos. Okay. Which is a similar kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah, yeah. Everything coming apart.
I can't show you, but behind me, it's not hung up right now, but there's a giant painting of the very last frame of The Sopranos that my
Mm,
wife did.
but at the table.
So that all happened in 3 months. My parents, and also at that particular like week of like they're tearing out the house. My dad's gone. My wife was also gone because her roommates had gone on this trip to California, like a road trip across the United States.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, dark night of the soul then. Then my wife came back. My parents and I moved into a duplex, and then I moved in with my wife. And we started our band, which was called The Mad Gleams. Okay. Later, we dropped the Facebook. Like Facebook, we dropped the later. Just Mad Gleams now. Okay. But we started playing shows and we were living in Peoria area, and that's how I met one of the most important people in my life. This guy Derek Hart. It's DERRICK Hart with no E. Okay, and he had just completed his DIY album called. And by the way, people should listen to this. It's wonderful. If you like kind of edgy alternative folk, weird music, that deals with faith and things. His album was called "The Shock You Experience at the Sudden Recollection of the Moment You Were Conceived." Okay, I'm.
Sounds like a good video title.
I met him he was playing the local open mic. He hosted local open mic. We walked in. He was singing the Muppet Babies theme song. Beautiful falsetto. It's like love at first sight. Bang. Like, this is the guy. So he's like about 10 years older than me or something. And we got to know him. We started playing shows with him. And then he was going to go on a tour. And he was going to go on a tour opening for this guy named Dave Bixby. And Dave Bixby had written an album in 1969 called Ode to Quetzalcoatl. And this was, it's like a Jesus drug album, like experimental folk 60s Jesus drug album. And Derek had covered one of his songs. It's a beautiful song called Free Indeed. And he had to find the guy to cover the song. And it's like this guy had recorded this album and disappeared. Copies of the album were selling for like hundreds of dollars in Japan and stuff. And they tracked him down. And then he did like the only, his first tour ever. And he played a few little dates in Michigan where he was from. And I think that actually his album had eventually been used as kind of part of a cult to kind of recruit people or whatever. So there was like this whole mystery and interesting thing around this guy. This guy had not played these songs in, 30 years or whatever. And so I found out about this tour happening. I heard Derek didn't have a car. I was like, I got a car. Boom. So my now wife and I went on this tour, playing my songs. And, this tour is kind of nuts for us. And she had a really hard time on the tour eventually.
I was gonna say,
As you can imagine.
your wife, your wife really loves you. You should be very
Yes.
good to that woman.
Yeah, this is very true. It's very true. And I was kind of, I was really into it in a way, but it was also very, very, very difficult. And, in part, there was sleeping in the car, there was crazy people, there was all kinds of weird stuff.
I can believe it.
So after that, I started like working on my album. Like, I'm going to do my DIY masterpiece now. That has not been completed.
All right.
So this is.
Well, TLC is a very maker space. There's a lot of DIY projects around the TLC.
True.
And you've now hitched yourself to one of the bigger productions in the TLC, I'll say.
Oh yeah. And then we so her roommate from college ended up with my best friend from high school, and they moved to Chicago. She was from the burbs. They moved to like Wicker Park, which is kind of like the hip neighborhood at the time. Allison found a job up there. We moved up there. And shortly after that, we got married at the courthouse. And then later we had a reception downstate.
Sure.
And yeah, then we were married and living in Chicago. Again, we are from a small farm town.
Yeah. What year are we talking?
This is 2012,
Okay.
I think. And yeah, we moved up here. I started doing a podcast. We'd gotten really into podcasts. We had worked together for this kind of entrepreneur guy in Peoria
Yeah.
for a few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And that's when we got into podcasts, man. And it was like, comedy podcasts and learning about this whole other world and whatever. And so we moved up there. I started a podcast. I was talking to comedians
Yeah.
and stuff. And then I quit doing that. And I was having problems.
Mm. People don't appreciate how fun the early days of podcasting was. I remember when I got into podcasts in the aughts, and not making them, but listening to them. And I thought it was the coolest thing that basically through these RSS feeds, you could just get free radio. I mean, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
better radio than what was on the radio. You could get, I mean, I listened to tech podcasts. I listened to, anybody who watches my channel should know the kind of, well, a lot of tech podcasts, but religion podcasts and I found unbelievable very early on once they started podcasting. And I thought, this is great.
Oh,
And
yeah.
because I never would have found the show. There was no YouTube or anything like that.
And yeah, like we were listening to WTF or whatever
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because like our boss had like accidentally downloaded it or something. Like he never even
yeah,
heard of it.
yeah,
And then we're like learning about the world of comedians and stuff.
yeah, yeah. Mark
And
Maron.
uh
Yeah,
and I was really into it because it was DIY too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally. Still
And
should be.
yeah.
Apple and Spotify keep trying to fence it off, but RSS is pretty cool.
But I had to stop doing my podcast because this like being outgoing and
Mm,
interviewing the people and then
yeah,
I'm getting frustrated because I want to be doing like what the people I'm interviewing are doing,
yeah.
but I can't do it.
Mm,
And and we both started to have problems. Like we were going to comedy shows and stuff, but we just kept having awkward situations, anxiety, and kind of pulling back. Uh, then eventually, we had another kind of like confluence of events
mhm,
happen. This is
mhm,
2017. Uh, our friends who we'd moved up there to be close to, they were kind of our only real friends in town, or our like main, And they were getting married, and they asked me to officiate their wedding.
okay. Because you got a philosophy degree, that should
Yep.
qualify you.
Yep. Pretty much. I think eventually, I think I got ordained in the Church of the Dude. I
Yeah,
think it
okay.
was
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Dudism, and I had not done like public speaking uh, in I don't know how long, if really ever. But I had this thing of would I be better than the next person that they would ask, and I thought I probably would be. So I decided to take this thing on, and I worked up this whole thing, and they
and
were
and you had actually been married, so there's
true.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everybody's got that.
Well, and we were I mean, yeah. Yeah, and like, it was an atheist wedding. We were the atheist friends and here we are to
Yeah,
do the thing. So I worked up this whole thing with like Rilke quotes and stuff and it was great.
yeah, yeah. I'm always fascinated by the content of atheist weddings. I just sit there and watch because it's like, what on earth are they gonna come up with? What do they think they're doing? And it's just it's really bad because if I'm there, I've really got to behave myself. But inside, there's a world of things going on in my head.
Oh yeah. Well, she had this thing like a shower type thing
Yep.
that Allison was going to.
Yep.
It was outside the city.
Yep.
There was a horrible storm. She was in a flash flood. She had to abandon our car.
Oh boy.
She was calling me. I talked her through it. She called the authorities. She had to leave the car. When she came back the next day, the car had been completely like submerged into the earth, like gone. They had to like pry it out.
Oh.
And I had to talk to this guy about, who's like prying it out for free and stuff. So that happens. Okay. Then we got bird mites. So there was a nest of birds outside our window.
Uh-huh.
We didn't really think anything of it. Then there's just these like little tiny things crawling everywhere.
Oh gosh.
I had real phobias about body things kind of my whole life. This was like doomsday scenario. There's also been this whole thing on tour where we were really worried about getting bed bugs because we stayed
Yeah.
at this one place and it was pretty nice. We were like, oh yeah, we'll just like lay down here, whatever. They're like, oh, we got some mattresses in the basement for bands, and then we like go down in the basement and there's just like mattresses with no thanks. And we're with this guy, Dave Bixby, too. And they're like, oh, yeah, and there's a bat down there. Yeah.
Sounds
So,
like one of mine, John Van Donk's Euro tours.
yeah. So, like we were like, my friend Derek, like he'd had experience with bed bugs and he was really freaked out about it. And then
Bed bugs are no joke.
no,
A lot of people don't have experience with bed bugs, but if you traffic in certain places with certain levels of society, bed bugs are common and they're no joke. They're once they're
yeah.
dramatic efforts to get rid of them if you are unfortunate enough to have them.
So I don't think that there were any or anything, but he was really freaked out about it. It made
Yeah.
me lifelong freaked out about it.
Okay.
These were not that.
Yeah.
But it was intense.
Yeah. Did they
So,
bite? I don't know anything about bird mites.
like, I guess that they can,
Uh,
but they're really tiny.
oh. So it
But
was
I
more the
mean,
thought of it rather than suddenly you've
yeah.
got all these little welts on your arms.
Well, and you could just see them, and it was a thing where the birds had left, and then they just go looking
Oh yeah.
for.
They lost their host.
So they were just like coming in, and they were like all over everything. Just like that, this happened right after that, like within months or very compressed time. We also then I married my friends, which took a lot. And then we we went on kind of our like one of our few vacations together. And we went to where they filmed Twin Peaks because we've been watching the Twin Peaks The Return.
Mm-hmm.
We finished that. Then we went and visited all the places it was filmed,
Mm-hmm.
which was awesome
Mm-hmm.
and weird
Yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
you're visiting set in real life. It's like psychedelic. Yeah. Very strange. So we do that, and then we had to leave our apartment because the apartment we lived in this attic apartment, and there was like this ancient heater in it or whatever, and they had this guy come check it out, and he was like, "There's no way that this is safe. This is putting off carbon monoxide. Like you guys shouldn't have this." We were like, "Oh." It just wasn't a good situation to like like they were gonna try to fix or whatever, but it was like we were going into the winter and it was like we gotta get out of here. So we move, we find a new place. It seems really great. Immediately there's an ice dam and the whole back of the new place floods. This is like 5 months, all this stuff. Now, I've been getting into Buddhism, and we had at some point, or just the year before, maybe we had done some therapy together, and then I started doing therapy on my own, and I was doing acceptance and commitment therapy. This guy, well, I'm not gonna remember his name. Stephen C. Hayes is the guy who originated it. So he was the first, he was the psychologist I was interested in, was this guy, and he kind of came up with this whole thing that's like a ecology of practices itself, and it was really inspired by Buddhism. My buddy Derek became a meditator, daily meditator. So I started meditating. I started, looking at stuff about Buddhism. I was, I had basically deconstructed from that philosophy degree, but I was not, I got interested in like philosophy of science. Okay. So then I found, I found out that like we don't really have any idea what we're talking about.
I know.
And
No, it's science. Oh yeah.
it started to, and it was, I mean, because when you shift away from like Christian belief, a lot of the idea is sort of like these people don't know what they're talking about. And a lot of the reason you leave is because you're like, they seem like hypocrites. They don't seem to know what they're talking about. And you assume that like someone will, you know? And then if you study the philosophy of science, you're like, okay, no one knows anything. And then you're like, but you've gotten used to this idea that everybody can be wrong, except you. So I was just like, I think maybe everyone's insane on Earth, or I am, And so I'm like still trying to find some kind of answers, even like uh, um, even like the therapy I did. Like I researched the guy and I saw that he had a more rigorous philosophical underpinning to the ideas and stuff. And I was like, okay, like I'm willing to actually try this because it doesn't seem totally nuts, So we ended up doing a 10-day retreat, 10-day silent retreat, which was extremely difficult.
This is going to be one of the this is Martin. This is a Martin Shaw thing, because Martin Shaw is looking around what's happening in the Orthodox world, and it's sort of like everybody wants to be a monk, but they're also kind of like the people that watched Free Solo and thought, yeah, I'm just gonna try El Capitan like this weekend. Are you gonna do anything? No training. I'm just gonna give it a shot. How hard can it be? And there's a lot of that going around. So yeah, 10-day silent retreat. How hard can it be?
I mean, yeah, it was really hard, especially for me. It was the hardest for me because my buddy was there and my wife, and it was hardest for me. And, I was like, why is everybody ignoring me? It's like what I was thinking. Very difficult, but also, also interesting for sure. But yeah, very, very difficult. And then we found Vervaeke. So through the podcast, eventually I got into the IDW. And I remember
at what time did you find Vervaeke? I mean, we really haven't charted the Vervaeke waves like we've charted the Peterson waves, because there was the Buddhism and Cognitive Science YouTube, which were really rough. And then he starts making some others. And then there's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, which is a bit more together.
Yeah. So we came in at Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. We'd heard, listen to the podcast. I heard all the IDW guys. So like I'd heard Jordan and stuff.
Yeah.
And I I found I thought of Jordan and Brett Weinstein as going together, kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
with the like. And I remember telling my family, and this was before kind of the propaganda had reached them. I was like, "There's this
Yeah.
interesting guy, and it's like a new kind of Christian apologetics. It's like he's a Christian apologist, but the arguments are from like evolutionary psychology. It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
it's weird. I thought they might be interested.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and I think when Jordan reminded me a lot of my dad, I would say.
Mm.
And uh, I've always been really close with my dad, and I love my dad. I mean, I love my whole family.
Yeah.
It's just, you get into things where there's like generational uh, traumas and
Yeah.
dysfunctions and things. And they
Yeah. Yeah.
go on and on. But yeah, it's like Jordan kind of reminded me of my dad. My dad taught college. He was very interested in a lot of the same things. Like he's an emotional guy. So he kind of reminded me of him. But then there were the differences I found interesting. But but I also think I wasn't quite coming from that background with the philosophy of science and stuff. Like I was a little like, Jordan didn't have the rigor for me.
Yeah.
But then I watched this video called like, you know, Jordan and John Vervaeke discuss the meaning of life. And I click on this in part because when I was in college, I remember talking to this guy in the philosophy department. And I was like, I want to make this like experimental movie about the meaning of life or whatever. And he goes, I have no interest in that. Which I would say was normal,
Yeah.
you know. So I was like, oh, so these guys discussing the meaning of life, this will be interesting. And it just was clear that that John had he's got like a brain like a planet, you know. And I had even like there were some things I was trying to understand. I was sort of like reverse engineering Neoplatonism without having studied it, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
I was like, there's levels of reality or something, and they're like independent somehow, but somehow and then like he started talking about the levels in that thing, and I was like, hey, that's the thing. And, so then my wife and I watched, I think it was like episode 4 or something of The Awakening. And then we watched it every week, uh, you know, and so that's when I got to know you, Paul, but I knew you as the God 1, God 2 guy,
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
which I have to say, way to psyop me into understanding the Trinity.
Yeah.
I mean, it took like 6 years. That's a really good psyop when it takes 6 years. You can't even trace where it came from.
don't,
But yeah.
don't reveal my sneaky pastor tricks.
But I did not understand that the TLC ever meant or would ever mean anything besides like those few big channels. I thought that little corner of the internet was like people with a PhD,
Yeah.
and us like, liking them in spite of that. Like I
Nosed
thought
up
that,
against the glass.
yeah. So, yeah, and so this is like 2019, and then uh, my wife and I made this music video in our apartment for this song that I'd written, and it was sort of like it had like a cleaning up your room, a little bit of thing going on in it, but it was sort of about being basically not agoraphobic, but don't trust people, and we were becoming more and more isolated. And then I was like,
Mm.
this is, I'm gonna get back out there. I'm gonna play shows. I'm gonna do what I think I'm supposed to do again. Then COVID. So yeah,
The
COVID.
introvert's eschaton.
Yeah. Yep. But with the exception of, you know, uh, possibly our health, it was kind of, yeah, COVID was kind of good for us in a lot of ways. We fully isolated then. And then we had to deal with stuff. And that was good in the end. And well, I kind of forgot a thing that's important actually.
Okay.
My friend Derek, a few years before, 2016, he was living in this town called Greenfield in Massachusetts, where he was spending a lot of time with this guy named Danny Monster Cruz.
Okay.
And Danny Monster Cruz was this young guy who had Duchenne's. It's like a kind of muscular dystrophy,
Okay.
confined to a wheelchair. And he had like some autism spectrum stuff. And he was like the spiritual leader of a small community of like weirdo outsider artist people.
Okay.
And he led this band called the Flaming Dragons of Middle Earth. And Derek would tell me about this guy. And then I went and met him. And he was incredible. He had the hardest life.
Yeah.
Very difficult home situation
Mm.
and disability. But he had like a saint-like presence and positivity. And this like punk DIY spirit. And so he led this band, and then I went to the band practice, and the band practice is, whoever shows up and does whatever they want, which most of which is insane. And he just spits lyrics, I think off the top of his head, that are weird and interesting and deep. And he's just like at Madison Square Garden. And everybody does whatever they do. And then he's just, thank you so much. And so the psycho perfectionist that I had become, working on my album for 10 years or whatever, this was profoundly inspiring. The same year, my wife took an improv class where she met her best friend in this improv class. And I started doing these improv albums where I just like get a 4-track and record songs off the top of my head on this thing. Something I did when I was like a kid. And eventually this was kind of part of my therapy. Even they were like, can't you just do stuff that's bad?
Yep.
And so I was like, you want to see bad? I'll show you bad. And so this is part of like my art research or something, like an experiment, with a pure heart and little else, what will happen, And so I got really into making these over the 10 years since then. Like I just finished my 30th of these crazy things that are maybe unlistenable in a certain sense, but meaningful to me. And so like when COVID happens, like I record 12 songs off the top of my head, like the day it's announced. And then I'm like making these albums and that one I did that day, man, I was so happy in a way the day COVID was announced. Because I was like the post 9/11 world that I've been living in is over. One way or another. It's done now. And, for a day, I was quite hopeful about, hey, maybe we'll learn something.
But we're people.
Yeah.
We don't learn so good.
I remember very quickly Vervaeke was like, "Nobody's gonna learn anything from this. It's gonna take another pandemic." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, he's right. He's gonna be right." But weirdly, like a month into it, I was back with God.
Hmm.
But this was, I mean, really the agape episode of Vervaeke was enough to transform my whole understanding of like the Christian tradition that I had been raised with that I
Yep.
didn't really even understand
Yep. Yep.
or pay much attention to. And yeah, and it wasn't until at Southeastuary that I was thinking about this, and I was like, I think that basically what was happening for me was I thought we might be living in a world that was worse than hell because it just seemed like debauchery was going on at scale with no end in sight.
Hmm.
No punishment. Like hell is like worse than hell would be a world where everyone lives like it's hell, but there's no punishment, right?
Hmm.
And then here comes this pandemic. And then it was like maybe on some spiritual level, it was like, oh, there's order to the universe, actually,
Hmm.
because this is deserved, you know?
Yeah.
And so I started, and I had a very, well, your God one, God two thing, like I sort of have this different idea, changing the whole definitions of all the things. I mean, I had grown up with God as a man in the sky,
Yeah.
this was the idea. So that was, back in. And then eventually, I mean, we were really isolated for a couple of years and kind of working our way through this stuff. And then I took the Vervaeke did a Dialogos online thing
Uh-huh.
weekend, and I went to that, and that was kind of my first idea of like, there's other people that are interested in this stuff that I could potentially meet. And I started hanging out in the Vervaeke Discord, and I was like looking for the art people because it almost seemed like left out. And they would talk about, like artists should take all this stuff up. And I'd be like, where are they? Where are the
Where are
videos on
they?
that?
Yeah.
Where. So, and that's how I met a couple people in that Discord. And that's when I heard the name Grizz,
Ah.
Griswold Grimm.
Yeah.
So we had a mutual friend who was like, you got to meet, Grizz. And I'm scared of people. And then I had some awkward like experiences in the Discord and stuff. And then I was kind of like, I don't know about Discord
Yeah.
people, or something. Uh, or just it was like a lot. But I did do
This
a show that was sort of TLC adjacent, but I still didn't understand that this existed. So she told me, like he did a rando with Paul. Paul talks to, to just anybody, but it never occurred to me that the people would ever talk again,
Oh.
you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't see the appeal, and I, you know, possibly was there's possibly a Christian kind of like I've been there,
Yeah.
something, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I heard about this man, and I did read something he wrote about meat space,
Yeah.
and it was clearly very interesting, but intimidating in a way. And I was just like, I'm not gonna go
Yeah.
try to meet these internet people because it's kind of like too much for me.
Yeah.
But I did a couple of videos, and then I kind of backed out of that, and then we had to move again. They sold our building, and people wanted to live in our place, so we had to move. And we've been thinking about leaving the city and stuff all through the pandemic, and it never made up our mind. And so we moved here, and then we we started we kind of started expanding our YouTube. Basically, we just watch YouTube for years. Like, this is on our TV. This is what we watch. We watch
Yep.
YouTube videos
Yep.
and movies. That's all we watch.
Yep.
So eventually, Pajot starts getting in there, and then I got Matthew's book. Then I took the symbolism master class that Jonathan did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was like, we hadn't even really been watching Vervaeke that much anymore, but it was like, we should really go see him at one of these things he does, because I really like the Dialogos thing a lot. It was like the first one they did, and they were working out the practice, and it was cool, but it was online. I was like, we should really try to find a thing to do in real life.
Yep.
And I was like looking up a thing in Canada, and it was going to cost thousands of dollars, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd happened to see a couple of Sam's videos where he was talking to Jordan Hall.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I got turned off for Vervaeke, was when it was like the religion that's not a religion. And they would say stuff that sounded like Machiavellian and creepy to me. I didn't like that. But then eventually that changed, which was good. But I was watching like Jordan Hall, and then, here's Sam, and he's like, hey, there's this Midwestary event. And I was like, what? There's an event in Chicago, and it's quite affordable, you know.
Yep.
So this was quite exciting. And basically, so we did, yeah, we're into the Pajots. We're starting to be like ironically Christian. Like, are we like becoming Christian? I think we're like becoming, we're talking about God and theology and stuff all the time. And it's like, I feel like, we're going to become Christian. We were talking about going to church potentially for years, actually, just to find people who were good people. Okay.
Yep.
And like have more of a social outlet. So we're kind of like just in this phase. And then we watched the gospel series, which is really phenomenal. And it's a crime that it's behind a paywall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we show up at Midwestary. Which I have to say is a hell of a first date.
Well, I don't know what your group was like, but your wife's group was. That was a group. That was a group.
I mean, we had Doug Wesney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was our leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had Annie Crawford.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we had like 2 or 3 CRC pastors.
Oh boy.
And then we had a young Orthodox guy. We even had a woman who had come there through keto, the keto diet. She had come in through Michaela.
Wow.
And she was like kind of a conspiracy theorist and stuff.
Wow.
But anyway, shout out to I think it was group 19, I think. I've written something. Yeah, group 19. Shout out. You guys were awesome. All of you.
Oh, that was a conference.
I talked to Neil a couple months ago, and Neil, I think he said this in the video, in the history of the corner or whatever. He said he's never found this combination of really good people who aren't boring. Who are interesting.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I would say
looked at it that way.
I would say basically I've been unwilling to compromise on that exact thing my whole life. And either we softened and then arrived at Midwestary, or we kind of avoided the corner until you guys became so awesome that you won us over. But I mean, had I been in a room with even 10 people that weren't in my immediate family in 5 years,
Hmm,
probably not.
hmm.
Maybe the movie. I mean, at the movies, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But like 10 people looking at me?
yeah,
No, no. That was, yeah, that was all there. And, I felt like my Vervaeke arc kind of ended
hmm,
because he gave that keynote, and it was like every feeling I had about my philosophy history and all my problems with my education, you know,
hmm,
like dropped on
hmm.
that. And, and I agreed with his assessment and was like, yeah, that is actually insane, that
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But we also had, him and Jonathan agreeing that we need to become saints,
yeah. Quickly.
and two people in the audience who have been talking privately about, I think I just like becoming a saint's the only thing worth doing. What else is there? Never talked to anyone else about any of these things. And then there we are, you know. And I did see Grizz there, although I knew who he was because
Yeah.
I've known him for many years, or a few years, but I was like, oh, that's him. But I had never seen the Grizz show.
Oh.
I hadn't seen any of this stuff. I didn't know any of this existed.
Oh
You know,
gosh.
like I knew there was somebody called Chad the Alcoholic. I didn't know what that. Like I probably avoided it out of fear. So but then I mean, then I got to know who he was there, and I saw that beautiful branding that they played there, and I mean, yeah. Then I started watching, the online stuff, and to me, the Grizz show is like what I've been looking for years. I mean, I've been talking about like for years. I've been like, uh, yeah, there needs to be a different kind of a thing than TV or celebrity podcasts or any of the, or book tours or any of this stuff. The world is looking upside down. When I went on your live stream, I talked about how uh, it's like an upside down world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
failure and an upside down, what looks
Yeah.
like failure might not be so. And to have not seen that and not seen it evolve and just seen what it has become and been like, that is the thing that I've been thinking of, you know. The like even in the local estuary, there'll be people who are like, I don't really he plays a lot of that, what's it called? Branding, like I don't know. And I'm like
Yeah.
trying to explain, I'm like, dude, commercials that the audience makes for themselves. Do you understand how important this is? So So we came to Southeastery. It's only a couple months later, and you know, Sherry was in my wife's group, and we met her right away, and we are getting to know her. But we still didn't know who's in the corner, who's on video, who's not. Very
Yeah.
limited exposure. It's only been like a month of dipping our toe into the online.
Yeah.
And then my group is Grizz and Corey and a couple of people who'd never heard of the corner or any of this estuary or anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, he really set the tone of our whole group because he just really opened up immediately.
Hmm. Wow.
And
In person.
I mean, it's just vulnerable.
Yeah.
Here's who I am. And it was like everybody was like, "Oh, we can do that? Let's do that." I mean, I think there was only one person who only a couple people maybe kept their cards a little close. I was probably
Yeah.
one of them because it was like, uh, like we're talking about stuff I've never talked to anybody else about, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I remember in his introduction, he described himself as the corner's charity case. So if he's if he's the charity case, then I think that makes me the Make a Wish kid. But I mean, that group went deep. You know, people cried at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, people were saying that they love each other,
Yeah.
and I, you know, s- possibly, a purposefully socially isolating person, was like getting people's numbers
Yeah.
because I hadn't done that at Midwestary.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember in the last day, they were talking about, like the leader was saying, how much it meant to meet this group. And I said, I don't really have any friends. So when you don't have a lot of friends, the people you do meet, you think about them a lot. So I'm going to be thinking about you guys a whole lot. So I was getting those numbers. And at the little uh, fire at the end, you know, I was getting Grizz's number and hugging the man. Couldn't help myself. So, you know, then I was keeping in touch with the people a little bit, and I went on Rigel's stream in like November because Sherry was on and I met her, so I just hopped on and said hello, and then uh, I was so happy because Neil did that history of the corner thing right after that, and I was there in his little Rigel stream deck, and there I am, man. So I'm like, wishing people happy Thanksgiving and stuff and getting messages from Grizz. And then last month I was like, you know, hey, Grizz, let's hang out. And he was like, oh, the video conversation. And I'm like, yeah. It's like, anyway, I got to talk to you. And so, we talked and I was telling him more of my story. And I said, he said something about me being like an artist or something like that. And I said, reclusive, or a musician. Like, are you a musician? I'm like, reclusive. And he said, you're a recluse with screen presence. We should do a show. So I wrote that down because you don't get a lot of, compliments, man. So it's like, what? I got screen presence. So then the next time I wanted to talk to him, he's like, should we do a show? Monetize me. Yeah, let's hang out, man. So
That's how it happened. Grizz will have occasionally he'll have someone on with him or he'll do a fringe encounter. But then when you started showing up regularly, it's like, oh, well, this is new. And I think it's really good, actually. I think it's really good for Grizz and I think it's really good for the show. Um, I think it's good for both. And so I was really happy to see it become more of a regular thing.
well, my perception has been that it might not be good for anyone but me. So I'm just gonna keep doing it because it's good for
No, no,
me.
no. It's good for Grizz and it's good for the show because
Because
it's a yeah. I mean, doing something regularly on YouTube is a thing because you are living with the machine and you are um, entwined with the machine if you're doing something regularly on YouTube, and that has a price. And even
I did start
for
to get gray in the beard like right away. I was like, is this what coming out of the lurk does? Did we all
yeah,
just end up looking like Paul? Like, how does this work?
I hope not. I hope at least some people manage to keep their hair. Um, yeah, yeah. I think it's
Well,
good, and yeah, I think it's good. I feel deeply grateful for the corner for and people are anxious about it for a variety of reasons. They're anxious about it because the channels are small. I think that's a feature, not a bug. They're anxious about it because it's so the corner lives by faith. I mean, there's no Grizz for all his grifting. I don't know if he makes enough money on YouTube to even claim it on his income tax. It's but it's the corner does live by faith. And I, at the end of 2025, Rod was like, well, it was Midwestary peak TLC. And I thought, I don't know. And, Grizz that came up on a Grizz stream. And, from what I kept looking around and I see, life is change and things continue to change. New topics emerge, new ships come into the flotilla, even as some, just with the churn, some sort of churn out. That's okay. It's not a reason to panic. It's just sort of normal life. So no, I feel very comfortable with how things are developing. Where it's going, I have no idea. But I like what I see because and your story has so many of those, I think, critical elements in it because it is about friendship.
well,
And
I didn't come in as like we came in person, really.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I
But you
got to
did
know,
come in through videos through Vervaeke.
yeah, for sure,
Yeah, that's how you found it.
but not, not like not getting too parasocial with people before you meet them
Yeah, yeah,
and are in the same room with them.
yeah, yeah. And 2026 looks like it'll be sort of a quiet year. I want to do a Living Stones conference in the fall, probably October. I really need to get working on that soon because they do take a lot. And my goal is to have them sort of semi-regularly at Living Stones, partly because our facility is small. So all of our conferences will be small. But I've been to most of them, and the conference that I really saw the potential for it was at the Northwestuary in Olympia, Washington. I had never been at a conference that was that powerful, and what you just described in the breakout group there, that's what I experienced there, and I saw the same thing at Midwestary. I saw similar things at Southeastuary. It's tricky because it's group to group. Not every group at an estuary conference is really gonna hit, but
Sure.
I've done a lot of groups in my years of ministry, and the percentage ratio of hits versus misses that I've seen in this is far better.
Well,
So,
I joke to I jo I've joked to Van Donk about and others about, I took that Dialogos, course with Vervaeke when they were working it out. The PDF was 3 pages, and I think there was 11 steps. It was maybe 2, you know? They're doing, like, science, They're trying to, but, so when I learned about the estuary protocol, I was like, this is, it was very similar experience, but, a lot less rigid and like here,
yeah, pastors came up with it, not scientists. The pastors have a lot of experience with people. Pastoral ministry is people ministry. And pastors watch people if they're any good at what they do. And they learn from the people they're watching. And so pastors sort of learn from people and use it for people. That's the whole gig.
I think that the combination is quite powerful between the online, the kinda keynote speakers at an event type of thing, and estuary.
Yeah.
And you know, the what else is like that? I
Yeah.
can't think of anything else like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I treated movies like a religion for many years. Uh, like, we live close to this, theater, they show old movies on film and stuff. It's kind of for aficionados, and crowds get younger and younger, and there's all these young kids who are like, "I wanna only see movies on film," and I'm like, "That was all you could do before you were born." And, but you get the sense of like, hey, if these kids could go to a estuary after they saw this movie, that'd be a little bit different, wouldn't it? I think a lot of people would like to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So Minneapolis 2027 maybe. I mean, they're talking about having a speaker-free estuary conference, and part of I'm very much into non-control, so anybody can have the estuary conference that they care to have, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I actually think there is something powerful to the back and forth between the two, because I've done so at my sister's place. I really gotta get my schedule together. I should really have a manager. If I had a manager, it would keep me on task with some things better than just me being having to manage myself. But at my sister's conference, or not a conference, it's really, I call it a retreat because it's a dozen people plus me. And it's just estuary all the time. But that's so intense, you need to have breaks. And even if you sleep through the speaker, at least you're getting a nap in.
Oh, yeah, and it's really great to just have some input that you can refer to,
Yep,
something, that was really,
yep,
and you saw a lot at Southeastuary too, where it was a little less, it could even just be conversations on stage. It could
yep,
really be almost anything.
yep. but at least give some people something to pitch.
Yeah.
Some people are coming in with their pitches preloaded, but some people, it just gives them something to pitch, and you need you need something to talk about in order for the connection of talk to take place.
Well, yeah, we're definitely gonna need more conferences because I'm like famous now. So, you know, that might not last. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, hopefully your fame is a slow burn and not a flame out. Hopefully
We'll see if I'm excommunicated.
you'll last longer than Pedro the Lion. Although you mentioning the name, I mean, fame is a funny thing. It's a funny, funny thing. And the kind of spaces you've been in, you know that. So, um,
Yeah, I don't know
mm,
that I'd recommend it or anything.
no, it's not to be recommended, even though everybody seems to want it. It's you're best off. Um, you want to be just famous enough to afford what you need. That's you should have no more fame than that. And because that's I mean, fame is sort of the frosting of reputation. That's, it's kinda what it is. So, anyway, we got 10 minutes left. How do you wanna spend it?
Okay, I got one thing.
Okay,
You did an interview a while back,
only one?
and you were asked uh, what you'd ask God if you could ask God a question. And you didn't answer. You said that it basically it'd be something personal that you shouldn't talk about publicly.
Yep, yep.
But in the time it took you to answer, an answer came into my mind. And my question was, why do you love us?
Mhm.
And I had an experience back when I was meditating a lot where I like wanted to, like get this enlightenment already. Like, let's go here. So I was trying to find my true self, and I just like hit this hard for hours. And then in the middle of the night, I was like, please, talk to me, true self, And I kind of gave up, and this voice answered and was like, I'm your true self. I'm right here. And I talked to this voice, and I was like, this is some weird fluke thing. The voice is like, you'll be able to find this, get back here. It's okay. So since then, I've kind of had this voice that I talk to at times, like a kind of personal thing. And so I was, praying, and I asked my voice, why does he love us? And the voice said, well, ask him that. I was like, ugh. So, so I asked him that, and you know, I did hear a reply, and there were two replies, and the first reply was because you're my children, and the second reply was I actually love everything according to its place and how much love it needs to become what it is.
Hmm,
So I love people a lot, and I love saints the most.
hmm, hmm.
Was that a demon or?
It doesn't sound like a demon to me. It doesn't sound like a demon to me.
Okay.
You get answers sometimes. And you got to be careful what you ask for because you'll get answers, and then you got to live with the answer. And it's. I mean, we're such a shallow. We're such a shallow culture, and to a degree, our science and our materialism has done that to us because we think answers are the kinds of things that you write at the bottom of a math problem or a regurgitation test. And um,
Was this
in the Psalms talks about knowledge that's you know too wonderful for us, and wonder is a weighty thing. So
is this part of why I liked your your rant about chimps? Because, you know, like a table doesn't take a lot of love to be a table. People need a lot of love to be people.
yeah, 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 yeah. I
How
like
much
the
are you willing
answers
to
you were
take?
given. Yeah. And I mean, and this. I mean, you started out all your splits, and part of the
Split level,
reason,
though. You know,
yeah,
split level.
part of the reason
Top
I
quarters.
love Chad's poem that I play often is, it's a shocking thing that God made us to be the kind of thing that must be made by other people because we're tremendously unreliable. And that God would put something so precious into human hands. And of course, in the Christian story, he puts his son into human hands. I mean, the people like to sort of, get all excited about the divinity aspect of the incarnation. But what I often reflect on is just the audacity and courage of the incarnation, where I often reflect on the fact that before the state allows you to operate a motor vehicle, you have to take classes and have a behind the wheel test. And any two people with a dick and a vagina can make a baby almost. And I can understand people looking around the world and looking up at heaven and just asking, are you being responsible with this? I get that. I Sunday, a good friend came by, and he works in a helping industry. I want to be vague because I don't want to out him in this. And in his helping industry, he mostly works with ex-cons. And, he says to me after we were sharing some stories, he said, the amount of suffering in this world. And he mentioned the Substack I wrote about my friend who lived against my door for years, and I'm probably going to write another one because he came back last week, and so I have a new chapter in his life. But just the amount of suffering in this world is just horrendous. And you tell your story and there's a lot of pain in your story. Your father's trials, your mother's trials, your trials, and their trials, their suffering, and we listen we listen to your sadness with empathy because our sadness understands your sadness and we connect at that level. But, I don't want to do anything to diminish your story, but I hear on a regular basis, I hear stories far worse.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
And and one of the strange things about suffering is that there's no measuring it. You know, in some ways,
It's funny. I don't. I don't even think of this story as particularly one about suffering. It's like you can imagine the mistakes that one would make if these things happened. And so, yes, I made those.
yeah, but you also suffered from mistakes others have made. And again, um in Chad's poem, it's all about it is about him, but a lot of it's about his parents. And his parents just trying to make their way through this world. And part of what I've been reflecting on lately, and it comes through different moments in my monologues, is um you know this world. Yeah, we can think about somebody living in a shack in the wilderness and trying to keep the wolves at bay. Yeah, that's and gonna there there's smallpox and there's yeah, that's hard and it's difficult. But now on one hand, we have this aspect of security and prosperity, but in some deeper ways, we've completely dysregulated human beings. And they're still having children. And so so again, you would not be wrong to look up to heaven and say, "Are you being responsible? Do you love us?" I understand the question. And for me, as I've said, I mean, for a lot of people, the problem of suffering and divine hiddenness are reasons to doubt God and doubt the gospel. For me, I don't know if I could live in this world without the gospel, because for me, it's a beacon of sanity and light that says he is responsible. And I don't know all the answers. I mean, he hasn't dropped down a sheet of, and I don't think those are answers I don't know that those are answers I could understand. And part of me getting there, because one of the main things Jesus brings into the storyline, there's a lot he takes obviously from the Hebrew prophets and the Hebrew scriptures, but one of the main things he sort of turns up in the storyline is God being our Father and that parent-child relationship with God. And then when you have a child, you learn what it's like to be on the other end of the equation. And you learn the fear of it, the terror of it. You learn, as human beings, we learn our failures through it. You're gonna If you decide to be a parent, you're gonna know failure because you are gonna fail at it. And in certain aspects fail spectacularly. But and then you understand, why you need grace. And not all parents love their children. That's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. And many people are terrible at love. And you don't and you learn that when you aspire to try to love a pet, to love a parent, to love a sibling, and then a spouse, and then a child. I mean, it just goes up. So, anyway.
And we can't even be loved.
No.
Like my wife and I have really been we've really been do or die for each other since day one. We've known that for like a year. Did we really know that? How long did it take to know that? Will we ever get that through our heads?
Well, in your parents' story, I mean, there's a woman in the Bible study right over there who remarried a spouse.
Yeah,
Sometimes they have one in between. So they
sure, sure.
divorce. Marriage number 2, divorce. And it's like, yeah, I got out of the first one because I thought it was bad. And then I had the second one and I thought, I should go back to him. You totally
Yeah,
understand it.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, oh, Ezra. No, this was really good. This was really good.
Great talking to you, Paul.
Yeah. So people can find you on Griswold Grimm. And if you don't
Yep,
know how to find Griswold Grimm, you're gonna have to look a little bit for it. I do now have in my now in my regular notes, my regular list of notes, a website, a link that will list like the 72 channels that are part of the TLC search engine. So that'll help people find this or that if they're looking for something.
sure.
But it's, in some ways, I think in some ways the TLC is true YouTube. It's YouTube as it was supposed to be, not as what it's become.
Yeah, it's
And
YouTube, not them tube.
yeah, yeah. And the TLC is in some ways the promise of the internet instead of what it's become. And I think, that gets into your answer, the second answer, and that if we, because you're you're old enough to remember the coming of the internet. I'm old enough to remember a lot more life before the internet. But there was, early on, there was all this promise of the internet. And I think if you want, I think your answer, that's why I don't think your answer is from a demon. I think it's a great answer because if you want something to become what it should become, you have to love it. And that was what basically Vervaeke says in that great agape clip, that what people are the products of agape. And everything else in this world, if it's going to meet its good created order telos, it requires love. And I remember, so the movie The Color Purple, there's a great scene in it where it's sort of the reason for the title. I haven't read the book, I only saw the movie. And and the woman says, I think it just pisses God off when you walk by the color purple and don't notice it. And the other woman says, are you saying God is vain? And she says, no, you know, everything just wants to be loved. And I think you're exactly right that whether it's the TLC or the internet or
I don't know
uh,
if we want it, but it's coming, man.
yeah, or the guinea
One way or
pig,
another.
it, if you want something to become what it should become, you got to give it love. It's the only way. But it's, as of course the Christian cross declares, it's a very costly way. And as parents learn, and as spouses learn. So, wow, Ezra, this was a biggie. This was a good one. This is a really good one. I'm glad you reached out. So,
Thanks for having me, Paul.
all right. Well, I'm going to end the recording. I got to figure because, yeah, we're guinea pigs here. Here we go.